And joining me now to discuss this in an exclusive interview, New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet. Premier, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Sharri.
Now, this is good news from the Prime Minister on kick-starting international travel, but people are unlikely to book trips if they think they're going to have to quarantine for a fortnight in a hotel. When will you move to end hotel quarantine and start the 1-week home quarantine?
Well, Sharri, we're looking at this at the moment. Our Minister, Stuart Ayres, has been looking at a pilot, which we've kicked off already. And he's currently going to bring a paper to our subcommittee this week, which we'll consider. But we really do need to move away from the hotel quarantine system. It doesn't make much sense, as the Prime Minister has said, that if you're double vaccinated and you're a returning Australian, that you need to be up in a hotel for 2 weeks. So we want to make this as seamless as possible. We really want to help the other states out as well in terms of their returning Australians, if they can come into New South Wales. And given the high vaccination rate here, I think that's a part we can play. We're in discussions with the federal government, and we want to work together, because if we can move that date forward from towards the back end of the year into November or earlier, I think that's going to make a lot more sense. And then not just, Sharri, for returning Australians, this also will help get tourism back on track as well. We're a global city. We want to rejoin the world, and we want to open up our country. And the best way to do that is not have a situation where people are stuck in a hotel for 2 weeks. It just won't work.
You just said November or earlier. Could we see international travel start as soon as this month?
Well, we haven't set a date yet in relation to that, Sharri. The earlier the better, but the trial's currently on foot. There's some considerations and learnings already out of that the Minister wants to bring forward to the Cabinet Committee this week. We'll consider that, and if there's a way to bring it forward that is safe, and we'll work, and we can work with the federal government opening those borders and putting those rules in place, we certainly will. Everything's on the table here. We want to get as many of those people. There are so many stories of people who have not been, Australians who have not been able to return as those quotas have been reduced from the states during this period of time. So the more that we can do in New South Wales and do some of the heavy lifting, we're open to doing it.
Yes. Look, there's been a lot of discussion in the past few days about the Chief Health Officer in New South Wales, Kerry Chant, not endorsing your opening up plan. Is this a statement? Is this a return of political leadership instead of letting the health officials call the shots?
Well, Sharri, I mean, the way we made those decisions didn't deviate from how we've made those decisions in the past, when it's not the role of public servants to make decisions on behalf of elected officials. It's those who are elected where the buck stops, and that's the collective responsibility of myself and the ministerial team. But ultimately, we take on board the health advice, the economic advice, the mental health advice. There are many aspects that our Cabinet will consider when making its decisions in relation to the roadmap. I think Dr. Chant set that out very clearly yesterday. We've got a great health team. Dr. Chant's been, I think, a superb health officer for our state, probably the leading one in the country. But whether it's our economics advice, our health advice, ultimately you can't outsource your responsibility as an elected official. That's on us, and we need to consider that advice when making the decisions. Then, back them in.
So on the discussions that are happening at the moment about opening up our international borders earlier, as soon as this month, is this something that Kerry Chant supports?
Well, Kerry Chant will be at the committee meeting later this week where that matter will be discussed, and she will raise the health advice in relation to that reopening. There'll be economic advice that's considered as well. All those issues come to the table, and you take, as an elected official, you take a step back, you listen to the advice that's there, and then we make a decision together in what we believe is in the best interests of our state.
Yes. This is from tomorrow. This is going to be the first time in Australia a state will make the decision to live with COVID. This is new territory. Premier, how concerned are you about some of the warnings we're hearing about the potential for there to be packed ICU wards and a surge in deaths?
Well, Sharri, our number one responsibility is to keep our people safe. I think we've done that successfully over the last 18 months. But there's no doubt as we open up, case numbers will increase. Our case numbers have been coming down, and that's allowed us to extend and bring forward some of those releasing of restrictions. But there's no doubt there'll be higher case numbers as we move through this and increase hospitalisations. But what's key has been our vaccination rate. We hit over 90% first dose just yesterday, and that's incredibly pleasing. And at 72.8%, if we can keep that vaccination rate going, that's the key to opening up safely. And I think I really want to thank the people right across New South Wales who have made an enormous effort to go and get vaccinated, because there's no doubt that keeps you safe, your friends and your family as well. So, yeah, we've got to learn to live alongside the virus. Every state's going to have its challenges. And I think as we move this, all the states want to help each other too. And if we can share health resources as we go down this path, other states maybe behind us. We're seeing some challenges at the moment, as you'd see in Victoria, and there'll be other states behind us as well. So I've had some very constructive discussions with the premiers over the course of the weekend, and where we can share health resources during this time, we will.
It's been previously canvassed that there might be a shift to reporting daily hospitalisations and deaths instead of the daily infection number. Is that something you're looking at implementing in the near term?
We'll be providing the health numbers here from tomorrow at 9 o'clock each day. I've spoken to the Health Minister about providing that information for the public, so that's readily accessible. But there's no doubt as we've got that vaccination rate up, Sharri, that we are moving into the phase, as you said in your introduction, about living alongside the virus. It's not without its challenges. There are going to be difficulties along this road as we open up. We've got another date of lifting restrictions when we hit that double dose at 80%. But ultimately, we all have a duty as people across this state to look after each other, look out for each other as we open up. And if we do that well, I think we can keep people safe and get our economy stronger out the other side. We've done incredibly well as a country in keeping people safe, in having a much lower death rate, whilst at the same time having economic success. And I think I know we can focus a lot on division between the states and the Commonwealth, but ultimately I think we've all done very well.
Just in terms of children going back to school, this is one element you have brought forward in the past days since you became New South Wales Premier. What will be the situation with children having to wear masks in the classroom? There's a lot of strong views on this. There are some parents really concerned that their children will have to sit in class with masks on, but then you've got others who say there should be a mask mandate in schools to stop unvaccinated children getting seriously sick. What is your view on this?
Well, I think you've set out all the competing views and ideas in relation to it, Sharri. There's a lot of opinions when it comes to bringing back school. My first principle is we need kids back in the classroom as quickly as possible, not just for them, but for parents as well. We've brought forward that date to the 25th of October, where all kids will be back at school here in New South Wales. We are going to require masks in high school. I recommend them in primary school, but obviously that will be a challenge, particularly with younger kids. But given, as you say, that most children are unvaccinated, we want to make sure our classrooms are safe. The advice from the health team, which we've taken on board, is that where possible with primary kids, if they can wear masks, but we're going to be practical about it. But we're also seeing, Sharri,
so you don't want that to be level. So you don't want that to be mandatory for primary school children. That should be up to parents or schools.
We're recommending it, but it will obviously be done on a practical basis on the circumstances of the classrooms. I mean, anyone who's got a kid in kindergarten knows it's going to be pretty challenging. So we're using common sense here. But also, what's very pleasing for those children over 12, we're seeing very high vaccination rates at the moment. So as we move through this period, I think we'll get to a point very quickly where the majority of high school students will be vaccinated, and then we'll reconsider that based on what we hear from the health side of things as we move through it. But we obviously want to get kids back in the classroom. We want them to be safe places, and we're working through that. And I think based on what we've done to date, we've been able to bring that date forward. I think there's a lot of happy parents right around the state.
Premier, I just want to ask some questions about your elevation to this role. You've only been in the job 5 days now. You're the youngest New South Wales Premier in history. quite extraordinary given the importance of this state. You're not even 40 yet. On a personal note, how did you feel when you found out you were going to become Premier of this great state?
Oh, Sharri, it's a real honour and privilege to have the opportunity to serve every single person in New South Wales in this way. Public service is a great vocation, and I want to give everything I can whilst I'm in this position to make New South Wales a better place. When you walk up to the Premier's office, there's a row of photos of all the former Premiers, and you realise that the burden of the responsibility, it weighs heavily on me, and it's something that I'll put every single thing I can into to make this state a better place for every single person right across New South Wales.
You've long been considered the successor to Gladys Berejiklian, and so you have had a lot of time now to consider how you might lead this state. What's your vision for New South Wales? What's your ambition for our state?
Well, I think we live in the best state in the country, Sharri, and I want to take it from good to great, a real focus on families, on our future and our quality of life. You know, I've been part of a government that's really turned around the state. We've built the schools, the hospitals, the road, the public transport that really ensures that New South Wales is the best place to live, to work, to run a business and raise a family. But I think we have a real opportunity now as we move through this pandemic, which is obviously our main focus, as we get through it, to take New South Wales to the next level. And I believe we've got the teams to do it. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but I really want to set up our state for success and, importantly, make sure that our kids and their kids have better opportunities than we have. And I think that's we all have an obligation as a people to make sure we leave this state a better place than we found it. And that's what I'll be looking at doing as part of my premiership for our state.
Yeah. One of the things that has gone by the wayside over the past 2 years, or the large part of the past 2 years as we've been dealing with COVID, is any sort of reform or new policy. You've spoken about GST redistribution, where you'll be fighting for New South Wales to get a fairer deal. Is this something you're going to start pursuing straight away, or will you wait until after the next federal election when it's more politically convenient for the Prime Minister, if he is still the Prime Minister then?
Well, I've already raised it with the Prime Minister, and he's obviously said that the situation he wants to see remain in place at the moment. But there's no going away from the fact that there's currently a review in relation to GST distributions, and New South Wales deserves to get its fair share. I've made my views pretty public over a number of years in relation to the changes that were made last year that, in my view, substantially favoured Western Australia. We were fortunate to work with the other states and territory treasurers, including the WA Treasurer back then, Ben Wyatt, to make sure there was a no worse off clause in place and was enshrined in Commonwealth law, and that's important. But I think as we come through this pandemic, there is going to have to be substantial changes to the federal financial relations, whether that's in GST funding and how the GST is calculated, or whether that's in how healthcare and education is funded from the Commonwealth and state level. What occurred in a pre-pandemic world is going to look very different as we move through this period, and I think we should be using this opportunity as an obligation to better the system, to look at ways in which we can have greater efficiencies that lead to better service delivery. And I think if we can work with Labor states and Liberal states to achieve that, we can do some really important things.
Yes. Look, just a couple more things before you go. This week there have been some quite strong attacks on your faith, your personal faith, and even the fact that you have 6 children. Has this upset you?
No, not really. I mean, it's kind of part and parcel of the job. But obviously my faith is important to me, and I think most people across the state respect people's backgrounds. I think one of the great aspects of our state, its richness, comes from its diversity, and we have many people of faiths, of cultural backgrounds, and that's a positive thing. And I think those kind of views are on the extreme fringes, and that as you said earlier, I'm 39 years old. I've never probably experienced some of the bigotry that in the last week in my entire life. So I've never experienced it. I think most people across the state don't share those views. We're a great state that believes in tolerance and respect to views, and I think that's what makes not just New South Wales great, but our country the place that it is.
Yeah, no, it's terrible you have experienced that bigotry over the past week.